Shamayim va'aretz, Ezri me'im Adonai, Oseh Shamayim va'aretz, Ha'itein lamod raglecha, Hayanum shomrecha, Hine lo yanum velo yishan, Shomer Yisrael, Adonai Shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha, Oyad yeminecha, Adonai Shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha, Oyad yeminecha, Yomam HaShemesh lo yakeka, Eyareach balayla, Adonai yishmorcha mikora, Yishmor et nafshecha, Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam, Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam. Al mekoma tavo v'shalom. V'yashov he'afar al haaretz shehaya, ve'aruach tashuv el Elohim asher netana. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. May our beloved soul be bound up in the bond of life eternal, and may God send comfort to those who mourn and grant strength to those whose burden is sorrow. Thank you, everyone who is able to be here today with us. And thank you to everyone from all over who has tuned into this broadcast. Of course, we wish we could all be in the same place together physically, but we are so thankful for technology and our ability to connect in new and different ways during this pandemic. Even during the times when our familiar rituals are not ones we can truly embrace, we thank you for joining your hearts together with those who are in mourning. We are here today in the Shered Cemetery. Over the arch, in that direction, which was the original entrance to this cemetery, it says in Hebrew, Beit Chaim Shel Shaarei Tzedek. Beit Chaim, a home of life, or home of the living. It's an odd name for a cemetery. But that's because here, on these hallowed grounds, we celebrate life. We honor those who have passed from our midst by honoring them for the way they lived, paying tribute to their accomplishments, their families, their legacies. Today, we honor Toby Gutwilik, Toba Chaya bat Yaakov v'Leah, the daughter of Jacob and Leah Labovich, of blessed memory, Zichronam Livracha, who passed away Thursday, the 26th day in the Hebrew month of Nisan, on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, at the age of 93. We began our service this afternoon with a psalm, Psalm 121 in Hebrew, now in the English. Shir Lama'alot, a song for ascending. I turn my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, from God, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, your guardian will not slumber. You see, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian, your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your life. God will guard your going and coming now and forever. May Toby Gutwilik go unto God in peace. Throughout her life, Toby Gutwilik did many things, and people knew her for many different things. Some knew her as co-manager and co-owner of Toby's Grocery, and the Toby in Toby's Grocery, a store which she and her husband Meyer ran on College and Salter, then ran a grocery store later on Corden Avenue when they moved south. Some knew her as a dietary clerk at the old Sharon home on Magnus, helping residents who had specific dietary concerns like diabetes, also serving as a translator for many residents. Some knew her, like I knew her, as a regular on Shabbat mornings at Congregation Shered Zedek. Some knew her as a neighbor. Some knew her as a matchmaker. Some knew her as a Holocaust survivor. Some knew her as a dear and beloved friend. For Toby was the kind of person who made friends easily with pretty much anyone she met, and everyone she met, and always opened her home to others for holidays or any occasion. And she was especially known for her family, who lovingly remember her today and going forward. She was wife to Meyer, Zichrono Livracha, of blessed memory, mother to Jack and his wife Sherry, Hersh and his wife Francine, and Fay Lynn and her partner Martin, Bubby to Matthew and Desiree, Johnny and Rachel, Kara and David, Sabrina, Mika and John, and Jackie, and great-grandmother, great Bubby, to Malachi, Miles, and Lila. She was predeceased by her parents, Jacob and Leah, as well by so many relatives who perished in the Holocaust, by her beloved husband, Meyer, and by her son-in-law, Phil. Zichronam Livracha, all of blessed memory. Today we will hear hesped, eulogies, from all three of Toby's children, Jack, Hersh, and Phelan. And then I'll have the opportunity to offer some closing remarks, including thoughts that some of Toby's grandkids have sent me to share this afternoon, before concluding with final prayers. All of these eulogies and stories of tribute paint the picture of a truly remarkable woman who embodies what is written in the book of Proverbs in the Bible of the Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. A woman of valor. Her worth is far above rubies. She is precious in the gifts she has given her family. Her children have found trust and truth in these gifts. They follow in patterns she taught. She is robed in strength and dignity, and she smiles at the future. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. We benefit and learn from her wisdom. May she always be credited for the fruit of her labor and for her achievements. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. May she live on in glory. It's my honor now to turn things over to the family, starting with Jack.
Hello. As you all know, I came in from New Jersey. I wanted to say that my wife Sherry and daughter Sabrina would have wanted to be here, but they couldn't be here. My wife had a very close relationship with Mom, constantly on the phone with her, as well as Sabrina. When Sabrina was born, Sherry was quite ill for a while. Mom came down and stayed with us for a while, and she made all the simchas, also with my dad in New Jersey. It was great to have them there. I never imagined coming home today and not seeing my mother. She was the rock of the family. I was last here with her in November of 2019 for about a week, and I stayed with her, and it was nice. She was a wonderful, loving mother, a wife, and a friend to many. When I was a child, she used to take me everywhere, even before my brother and sister were born. We would go to Selkirk all the time. She would buy me a Roy Rogers cowboy hat and gun. And then some ice cream or some various treats. I used to like to go for walks with her and Dad when they were both very well. We had some fun times. They came to visit me when I was working in Las Vegas. And then they came to New York, and we went to Atlantic City. We had good times. I remember that I got to dance with her at my wedding and Matthew and Desiree's wedding to the song Moon River. Special moment. Mom was very kind and generous. She adopted an old Jewish lady from the Sharon home called Chana Winkelstein, and I would pick her up and she would come to holiday dinners. When my friends would come by to the apartment, she would feed them food like borscht and cabbage rolls. They enjoyed that. She would make these for me every time I came because I liked them so much. She even gave me the recipe for cabbage rolls when I was in college. She had a secret ingredient, ketchup. So I made a pot of it. Lasted about a week. Mom and Dad supported me very much so when I was in college in Toronto and in Brooklyn. And she would always send a birthday gift, Hanukkah gift, Hamantash and Purim. She never missed one. Not even to this year. I used to talk to her on the phone because I lived so far away. I would tell her the stories about what vegetables I was growing in the backyard when I had a house, or out of the pots behind my apartment, my condo. and I would give her the weekly crop report, or tell her stories about a wedding that I had done recently. We will all truly miss her. I hadn't expected it to happen so suddenly. I was planning to come in May, but we will always remember her.
Hi everybody, and also the people listening online. First, I'm just going to read a few brief words from my wife Francine, and on behalf of Francine, Mika, and Jackie. This is Francine's words. I'll always thank my mother-in-law Toby for providing me with my husband of 30 years, Hersh, and being supportive of our two daughters, Mika and Jackie. As their puppy Toby, you will always remain such a strong role model for them. Being an only child, I'm also glad to have inherited a brother-in-law, a sister-in-law, Jack and Phelan. Toby was the best person to talk to. When I witnessed the trade towers in Manhattan crumbling to the ground, she was the first to call and asked Hersh to turn on CNN, worried that I was in the vicinity, and I was. When I needed someone to tell my story to, she had the patience and strength to relate to my story and allow me to cry bitter tears. We did hold hands, give cheek kisses, and hugs that were immensely warm. She always had enough tenderness for me when I deserved it, but also firm and necessary advice as I gradually got back on track. Recently, in the past half year, I made a point of calling her early every day and simply checking in. It was good for both of us. Thank you all for listening here, joining us as we remember our dearest Toby. She will be missed greatly. Here's a few words from Mika. Right on the same day she passed, Mika wrote this. My bubby Toby passed on this morning. She survived the Holocaust as a teenager and immigrated to Canada, where she had 3 children, my dad, Isaac, Hersh, Jack, and Phelan. A true matriarch, she tirelessly served her family and community all the way up until the last weeks of her life. She leaves behind an exponentially growing and loving family. I'm so grateful for the time Malachi and I got to spend with her since moving here. I'm proud to be a granddaughter to such a strong woman who, in spite of the adversity she went through, lived a full life into her 90s. She has shown me what unending love and care can look like, an example I strive to resemble. Today I celebrate the life and legacy of my bubby Toby and send my love to all my family who will surely grieve our loss. I love you, Bubby. Mika Denizio. And now I'd like just to say words from my perspective. Mom raised us all, each in our unique way, according to our own needs. And I'm going to focus on the stories of the 1970. Mom was at the peak of her strength then, and that's when her and I spent so much time together. We used to stay up late in the den, and together must have watched every classic black and white movie ever made. The rest of the family was sleeping, and we were the night owls. She always loved the pizza I made for her from scratch on Saturday nights. This was the days before they invented reality TV. Our bond was based on simply enjoying being together and hanging out, where words seemed unnecessary. She liked to scratch the back of my neck as we watched our shows. Later, to my dismay, she became a fan of the show Dallas, and I would sit and watch it with her even though I wasn't exactly into it. I finally figured out why she liked it. Any tension or worries I may have had would dissipate in her presence. I like to tell you another story that nobody knows about. Maybe even my siblings don't know this story, but upon completing parrot school only went up to 7th grade. So the next fall I was scheduled to start my first day of school at Edmund Partridge Junior High, just a couple of blocks away from here. I sat down. Anyway, my parrot school friends were mostly going to Jefferson, so I I didn't know too many people. I was expecting to see a few familiar faces of kids that I knew from Tom Matora or the YMHA floor hockey. But I sat down at an assigned desk and I did not recognize one single kid. The teacher then said, "Welcome to 7th grade." I was shocked, and I quickly raised my hand. "You've made a mistake. I'm supposed to be in the 8th grade." The lady teacher said, "No, states clearly on this piece of paper," and she's waving it in the air. You are registered in this class." Being my mother's son, I retorted, "You can have your paper. I'm going down to the office." And I abruptly left the classroom, going down to the principal's office. I came to his counter, and there's Principal Albert Rothenberger. "May I help you?" in a slight German accent. I explained my predicament. He says, "Well, Mr. Gutwilik, according to my roster right here," he scans the ledger with his finger. "Aha, there you are. Registered for the 7th grade. It's no mistake." He then asked me to go back to the 7th grade class for at least another day until the situation was sorted out. I firmly said no. Instead, I asked to use the phone to call Mom. She was still at home a few short blocks away. He had no idea what he's in for. I thought, he passed me his office phone. I called her to come down to the school. She arrived in under 10 minutes. As he waited, I confidently said to Rothenberger, "Well, you're going to have to deal with my mother now." As Mom entered the school front door, we quickly walked together. I explained to her what was going on. The principal and her greeted one another, and after hearing his voice, she seemed to size him up. She asked me to leave the room and wait outside the door. I didn't hear any loud exchange or raised voices, but at the time, I like to imagine that she ripped them a new one, as we say today, or ungesiedelt in Yiddish. In hindsight, as an adult, I'm sure she was smart, cordial, and diplomatic, but I have no idea of the actual words spoken. But after their brief meeting, they resolved the problem. They came out of the office where I was waiting. He genuinely seemed to admire her and thanked her for coming on such short notice. She said goodbye to me and left to begin her workday at the grocery store. Toby's still on college. Mr. Rothenberger led me to the correct 8th grade class and personally introduced me to the class. I happily sat among friends, some of whom I'm still in touch with today. For the next 2 years at that school, Mr. Rothenberger, who many kids were afraid of, treated me with the utmost respect, kindness, and empathy. A few short years later, when I was 15 years old, for about a year I was seriously ill with ulcerative colitis. Mom helped me recover. After much misdiagnosis and too many hospital stays in town, she insisted we go to the Mayo Clinic. It was no easy feat bureaucratically to allow for that, but she did it. In addition to starting on that healing, it turned out to be quite a fun adventure we had together. A month later, I was on the road to full recovery with a new special diet without any medication. Around that time, seeing that I was very much comforted by doing art, she encouraged me and would take me downtown to buy my art supplies. This was the start of what eventually led to my career as a professional graphic artist, first in Toronto, then New York. During those times in the mid-70s, we had an open house, revolving door, 24/7 kitchen with cousins and close family friends. This is why she liked the show Dallas. It reminded her of her childhood and of cattle farm. Not to mention Jack's downstairs band, entourage, and rehearsals. But aside from family and friends, there were also other people she helped, and a few of them came to mind, and I even got some condolence calls where people told me some stories. I'll mention just a few of them. Mina Kantarovich, a woman a bit older than my mother. Ruben contacted me, one of her children. He just reminded me that my mom came to look after him and his brother and sister in their home while they were small kids. This lasted a few days while their mother was in the hospital. I'll mention Hannah Winkelstein, who Jack already mentioned. She was a 1920s chalutz to Israel from Bessarabia in Moldova. She was a former construction company owner. She helped build Jewish schools in Calgary and Winnipeg, and she loved Yiddish songs and poetry. She was a widow without any children. Mom met her during the years she worked there at the Sharon Senior Home. She was an exceptional person of strong character and quickly bonded with Toby, in whom she saw a kindred spirit. I also became her friend and confidant. She could continue to come to home for every holiday for the next 17 years. She was a strong role model for us. Mrs. Braverman, who none of us might know, on College Avenue, down the street from the store, an elderly lone woman with no children living in Winnipeg. She had taken ill. Quickly, Mom comforted her at her home, and in the hospital in her final days, holding her hand as she passed. Next door, we had Mrs. Eva Weinstock, also dying of cancer. Mom knew how to spot those people that needed help and hold their hand and provide them comfort. Mrs. Mokri, a recent immigrant from the Ukraine, living in the apartment building next to our grocery store on Corden, now Bar Italia. Her husband had cruelly abandoned her in Europe after World War II, but had recently brought her over. Mom rescued her from her husband's frequent physical abuse. After a particularly violent episode, Mom finally brought her to shelter with us at our home on Burn Avenue in West Kildonan. I decided to take photos of her bruises to be used as evidence. With my mother's support, she successfully sued for divorce. She was unable to afford a nice home and sponsor her son and his young family to immigrate from Ukraine. She remained part of our circle in the following years and would come over to bake with Mom because they had similar old country recipes. I don't know where she found the strength to do what she did. It was in her nature. I asked my father, my father and somebody else, says, how do you admire, how do you put up with all the frequent visitors? And Dad said, we'll have to just sit back and allow her to fulfill her mitzvahs. The last day I spent with Mom, I came over with our grandson Malachi on Tuesday, March 23rd. He spent the afternoon playing at Bubby Toby's place. He likes to keep a stash of his toys there. It turned out to be her last day at home before the stroke. Coincidentally, in the day or two preceding, the other great-grandchildren, Miles and Lila, had spontaneously dropped in for a short visit. And also, Johnny and Rachel had called with good news to announce that they were expecting. Mom was on cloud 9, and she expressed that she hoped she could last to see just one more great-grandchild due in the fall. We both agreed that this was a very joyful and perfect day for Bubby Toby. So it was a happy day. Now I would like to thank Fay Lynn, a proactive and loving force of nature in her own right. She has absorbed so many of Mom's good traits. Having always lived here, she has a deep perspective so intertwined with the daily life of our mother. Fay Lynn would now like to share her important words.
This is my toughest public speaking event of my life. This is a day I've been dreading. For the last 7 years, my mom and her team, as I call us, have done everything possible to keep her with us as long as we could, while still ensuring she had a good quality of life. But we couldn't do it anymore. On April 8th, coinciding with Holocaust Remembrance Day, at age 93, the same age as my dad when he passed, a beautiful light was extinguished. No coincidence with Holocaust Day. I'm standing here to pay tribute from my experience of my mom, the most amazing woman, mother, Bubby, and great Bubby. There isn't enough time to fully do this today, but it's a start. Mom was the epitome of a survivor. She was my hero, my everything. She was born in Czechoslovakia and had a good childhood, loving parents and 2 brothers. She was separated from her family in 1944 and sent to Auschwitz, then Hamburg, and finally Bergen-Belsen. At liberation, she was reunited with her father and 1 brother briefly before they passed of illness. At age 18, she was the only member of her immediate family to survive and was the last relative of her extended family who, like her, survived the Holocaust. Mom didn't want to talk about her experiences in the Holocaust. It wasn't until I was a young lawyer that my mom opened up about her experiences, as she wanted me to pursue her claim for restitution, which had earlier been denied. We worked on the claim for several years together, gathering and reviewing her experiences, and ultimately we were successful. My first legal case with meaningful results. Instead of living in the past, Mom turned her pain and life experiences into making a new life and living to the fullest. She had an uncle living in Saskatchewan, and he brought her over after the war, where she met my father. They met at a New Year's Eve gathering. Dad, who was a tailor, told us how he fell in love with her instantly because the seams in her stockings were straight. They married within a year and started a family. My brother Jack was born in Saskatoon 70 years ago yesterday. Shortly after, they moved to Winnipeg, where my brother Harsh and I were born. They began a life in Winnipeg. They made close friends who became our family, the Deutschers, Levines, Beneviches, Zafmans, and others. Friendships that lasted a lifetime and extended to their children, who still kept in touch with her and remain my friends today. 2 of them are here today. Growing up as the youngest and the only daughter, I always felt special. We had a wonderful relationship and did many things together. I grew up beside her as she ran a grocery store. All my friends spent time there. Our home was always open. We started mother-daughter shopping trips. In those days, we'd leave my dad at our grocery store in Corridon on a Saturday night and go to Woolco, before Walmart, at Grant Park. My mom loved to shop, which she passed on to me. We drove to Fargo and Grand Forks for shopping trips many times, and my friends would come with. When I was 12, I didn't have a bat mitzvah, but my mom took just me on a special trip to Israel. It was a trip I will never forget. I met all my family there on my dad's side, and it was the start of my love for Israel. We shared many other mother-daughter trips together, mostly to attend extended family simchas in Vancouver, Toronto, London, Ontario, Cincinnati, or Chicago. Growing up, my parents gave me as many opportunities as they could afford. I wanted to play the piano, and my mom worked extra hard to save up money to buy me a second-hand piano. Whatever I wanted, she made it happen. My piano is now sitting at Kara's house for Miles to learn one day, and he's already shown such an interest. But more than what I did with my mother was what I learned from her. She was the best role model of a mother, wife, grandmother, and friend. There are so many adjectives to describe her: kind, strong, brave, hardworking, talented, loving, loyal, devoted, community-minded, and giving. She was kind to everyone and made friends wherever she went. If she met someone who had nowhere to go for the holidays, there was always a spot for them at her table. This later extended to my friends whose families didn't celebrate the holidays. My brother Jack's best friend, Jack Cates, reminded me how our mothers became friends. She too was from Czechoslovakia, and my mom heard there was a woman from her country who was sick with a new baby. My mom went and looked after her and her son. The 2 Jacks shared a crib and became best friends, which they still are today. Mom's devotion extended to all our extended family, wanting to keep family connections strong. My cousins Bev and Joe lived with us for different periods of time. Mom cherished frequent calls she had from cousins Karen, Bev, Joe, Gail, and Miriam. and loved their visits to Winnipeg. Her emphasis on devotion to family allowed me to develop strong bonds with my small but strong extended family. Everything done by my mom was done with love and a love of everything Jewish. Keeping a kosher home and celebrating all holidays and Shabbat dinners were important to her. It was just a given for my kids that Shabbat dinners and holidays were with bubbies. When other mums were at home, my mom worked hard running grocery stores so she and my dad could afford to send us to Jewish day school. They valued Jewish education so that we would never forget the Holocaust and all it represented. My mom looked after a husband, a home, ran grocery stores, raised 3 children, a dog, home-cooked everything, including the dog food, all without a housekeeper. She was superwoman to me. When I got engaged, she welcomed Phil's family into ours. She loved them all and maintained a close relationship with Esther all these years. They were partners together in helping Phil and I raise our triplets. My mother decided they should move south to be closer to us. Babysitting was her pleasure, and we knew we could always count on her. This time she spent with my kids was a gift to the kids that had mutual lifelong benefits. My kids loved her so much, and she loved them beyond words. There is nothing she wouldn't do for any of them, baking, cooking, each of their favorite things. Even last month, when she was still well, she wanted to have stuff in the freezer for the kids, just in case, she would say, just in case something happened to her. Kreplach and pierogies for Jonathan, specially made honey-free hamantaschen and applesauce for Miles, roly-poly for Kara, matzo balls, knishes, and liver for Matthew. At 90, she decided to take up challah baking and was so happy to make the kids challahs for their Friday night wedding dinners. Mom showed her love through food. There were Friday night dinners all the years until recently. She cooked for the holidays, even up to this Passover when we enjoyed her gefilte fish, matzo balls, and potato blintzes. Each holiday had its own traditional foods, sweet kugels, babkas, latkes. Every year, she made hamantaschen with Kara, and I was in charge of packaging and mailing them to New Jersey, and in recent years to Los Angeles, where Phil's cousins became the lucky recipients. We have all the recipes so we can carry on, which was very important to her. She taught our Imelda how to make everything because she knew I'd need the help. As devoted as Mom was to my kids, she was devoted to my dad. When my dad suffered a stroke at age 80, she was determined to make sure he was well looked after at home. She would never hear of moving him to a nursing home when his health declined, and for 13 years she focused all of her energy on his care. With the help of dedicated home care workers, she cared for him until his final 2 weeks when he was hospitalized. Mom loved my children, her grandchildren, Matthew, Kara, and Jonathan, and welcomed their life partners, Desiree, David, and Rachel. She was so happy to dance at each of their weddings. She was determined to be there, even if her health was declining. And when Miles was born, she was energized. She adored him and was so happy to go there every week with Imelda to help babysit. When Lila was born in January, Mom was so grateful to be here to be able to hold her. When Jonathan and Rachel told her just a few weeks ago that they were expecting, she said, "I hope to be there." My mom was my rock. She turned her tragedy into triumph. She built a life full of love and friendship and enjoyed her family. When tragedy struck my own life 7 years ago, she was there to pick me up and teach me how to do the same. She taught me how to be strong, to fight, and to carry on. There was nothing she didn't do for me. 1 month after Phil died, my dad died, and on that same day, my mom had a heart attack. She said Dad wanted her to join him, and I told her no, she needed to stay, that I and my kids needed her. Her body was telling her, "It is now time to focus on yourself." This began our 7-year journey to keep her with us. It was my privilege to be her person, to do for her what she could no longer do, to advocate for her when needed. I enlisted my children, my brothers and families, got her the best caregivers, and built a Team Toby. Team Toby had a big mission, to keep Toby as healthy and happy as possible, to keep a quality of life and allow her to stay in her home as long as possible with any comforts she needed. Her doctors would say she was a superstar patient, staying as active as possible, buying her own oxygen meter, daily blood pressure checks, weighing herself daily, making sure her blood sugar levels were perfect, and making sure she ate no added salt as part of her daily routine. I must thank her family doctor, Dr. Permack, and his staff, and her devoted caregivers, Imelda, Irene, Finette, Sathy, and Giselle, who provided the best care and cared for her as if she were their own mother. Imelda has been part of our family for 32 years, and my mom was like a mother to her. In turn, Mom loved all her caregivers and taught them how to cook many recipes. They were all devoted to her and allowed her to be in her home until 2 weeks ago. I could really go on for hours, but I won't. My mother was the best, and I miss her tremendously already. Our 2 to 3 times a day phone calls of late, my daily check-ins, all gone now. A huge void in my life and in my heart. I had the privilege of being her daughter and being with her to the end. You can now rest peacefully, Mom, knowing you gave us everything you could. You gave us and taught us everything, and we will carry on your legacy. Thank you for all you have given and taught me. I will take your advice of just a few weeks ago and rest up for grandchild number 3 and hope to follow in your footsteps of being the best Bubby. You've left big shoes to fill. Mom, I will remember you forever, and you will always be in my heart. I hope that passing on Holocaust Remembrance Day reunites you with your family who perished, and now that you are in heaven with Dad and Phil.
I want to thank Jack and Hersh and Phelan for those heartwarming, brave, and beautiful eulogies for your mother. I mentioned that we've heard a little bit from some grandchildren already, but I was sent some things from a couple of grandkids. Kara sent me something that I wanted to share about her bubby Toby. She was my role model from a very young age, dedicated to her family and to her friends, and I think taught me how to be a friend. Fond memories include Friday night sleepovers. We would sleep together in my mom's childhood bed. Every morning she would tell me that I kicked her out of bed in my sleep. And I pretty much believed that until last week, when the thought occurred to me that maybe she actually just went to go sleep in her own bed with my Zadie. Saturday mornings would be trips to Sears and strawberry sundaes from McDonald's. Then there were the baking and cooking rituals centered around the holidays. Kreplach and Hamantaschen were my domain. She taught me from a young age. Recently, she also taught me knishes and sweetkugel. But the holidays for me were also marked by gefilte fish, matzo balls, pies, and blintzes. Especially Hamantaschen. There are pictures of me baking them with her when I was 5. My son Miles even has 2 years of pictures of helping us, and he loved getting to eat them this year. And my Bubby loved watching him eat them. This year, Bubby did more of the supervising role with the Hamantaschen baking, and she said she was proud of me, knowing I was ready to take on the role of making them for the family. Bubby Toby got so much joy from feeding others. She took so much care and pride doing that for my Zadie. When I moved out, I continued to get her delicacies all to myself. She'd make me a whole extra babka to break the Yom Kippur fast. When my son Miles could eat solids, she was making weekly pureed apples and carrots, and our freezer was always full. And always coming over around lunchtime so she could watch him eat, with a big smile on her face. Miles made her so happy. Recently on the phone, she said, "Kara, I just love him." With an excitement that I didn't hear too often in her voice. Bubby has been in and out of the hospital a lot in the last number of years. But what amazed me was her ability to form relationships with all her roommates. By the time I got to the hospital to visit, she always knew her neighbor's whole life story. I think she also had that ability with her home care workers, who I know meant a lot to her. This ability even allowed her to become a successful matchmaker for one of her doctors. And most of all, she was so proud of us. Whenever she was in the hospital, she would ask her doctors if they knew her grandchildren, and proceeded to tell them that Matthew and I were doctors. She would beam. And I have been so proud of Bubby Toby. She spent her life dedicated to taking care of others. When my Zadie died 7 years ago, her life changed. She all of a sudden had her own health issues to deal with and time to take care of herself amongst all of her grief. I'm so proud of everything she did and how hard she fought to stay well in that time. She was inspiring. I'm going to miss her so much, but I have comfort in knowing that she deserves and is ready to rest. Thank you, Kara. And I also was sent something from Sabrina, who, as Jack mentioned, couldn't be here. But she sent along a few stories that I'll share now before our closing prayers. Bubby Toby always made sure my dad had his cabbage rolls and borscht. It was very important. She never let anyone go hungry, especially him. Speaking of food, Bubby always dealt with me and my picky eating. She always had ranch dressing in the fridge for salad when I'd come over. And when we would make cookies together, they had to be chocolate chip or I wouldn't eat them. She even swapped out the jelly filling of her Hamantaschen for me to Nutella and sent them to New Jersey because she knew I would love that. She was always thinking of others and lived to make others happy and feel loved. Since I was little, whenever I saw Bubby, I gave her a new name. Bubbas. I say it right? Boobas. I didn't know. Boobas. And would always comment on how cute her wrists were because they were a little bit puffy and I loved to squeeze them. Naturally, giving a nickname to her, I called her cute wrists Poofus. Because they were puffy, and I used this even into adulthood. I know she loved it deep down. Whenever I would sing for the family, Bubby would cry. She always cried. In typical Bubby fashion, she never failed to do so. She always cried when she was happy, because her grandchildren made her the happiest, and anything they did touched her heart. Sabrina, thank you so much for sending that so that I could share it today. When I was introducing the eulogies, I referenced the very famous reading of the Eshet Chayil, which is often translated, as I did earlier, as a woman of valor. But it can also be translated, and in some places it is translated as a mother of generations. After hearing this afternoon from Jack and Hersh, Fay Lynn, and several grandkids, it is clear that Toby Gutwilik was a mother of generations. The impact she has had on so many lives, the memories, the stories, they will be passed on. They will be shared. And they will continue to inspire the fourth generation, her great-grandchildren, whom she got to see get started continuing her family tree. And her impact will live on. In the Talmud, we are told that the tears shed at the passing of a kosher person are so precious to God that God counts each of them and stores them in a divine treasure house. But the rabbis ask, what is a kosher person? Why not an important person or a great person? When kosher is applied to a person, it implies integrity, a goodness, a life lived in the spirit of Judaism. It includes a life of involvement with family, service to community, and reverence for God. We have heard today how Toby Gutwilik cared about keeping a kosher home, but in truth, she lived a kosher life. And it is my honor now to recite in her memory the El Malei Rachamim prayer. El Malei Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Amtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'malot Kedoshim Uteorim Kezohar Arakia Mazhirim En Nishmat Toba Chaya Bar Yaakov Elea Shelcha Leolama Began Eidente Menuchata Anabal Harachamim Hastireya Beseter Knafecha Leolamim Utzror Bitzror Achaim Et Nishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'tanuach V'shalom Al Mishkava V'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Toby Gutwilik, who is gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that she find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. As we know, after over a year now, we can't have Shiva in the normal way that we do. But Toby's family is organizing a number of Zoom calls, a Zoom Shiva, if you will, in her memory, to share more stories, to honor her and respect her, but also to begin the process of comforting her family, who have now entered into a period of mourning. The calls will be held this evening from 7 to 9, and then tomorrow in the afternoon from 2 to 4, and in the evening from 7 to 9. If you have not received a link yet, please be in touch with Fei Lin so you can join in and participate. Also, the family has asked me to mention that anyone looking to make a contribution to offer tzedakah in Toby's memory, there is a fund at the Jewish Foundation for Holocaust Education and Awareness set up in memory of both Meyer and Toby. And that would be a welcome place for any tzedakah. In a moment, we'll recite the Mourner's Kaddish to conclude our service. And family members who are here will be able to participate in the familiar ritual of shoveling earth into the grave. In our tradition, to shovel earth into the grave is a mitzvah. It's a righteous act which we do without any hope of any reward. With this act, we take on the responsibility of caring for our loved one until the very end. We believe in Jewish tradition our loved ones deserve to be buried by our own hands. Kind, knowing, sorrowful hands. Hands that once held their hands. It is a painful act, but we remind ourselves that it is one born of love and compassion for someone who meant so much to so many people. Earlier with the family, we recited the words from Job, the epitome of suffering in Jewish tradition. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi shem Adonai mevorach. God, you have given, God, you have taken away, blessed be the name of God. May the memory of Toby Gutwilik be for a blessing. as we mark that her essence will never leave our hearts and our souls. The Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yibarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shemei dekudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, ta'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates peace and harmony on high bring peace and harmony to us, to all Israel, to all of humanity. And again, let us say, Amen. To the family, I offer the words, Hamakom yinachem etchem betoch sha'arav elei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May you be comforted and consoled among those who are or who have ever been in mourning in our community. And to everyone, both here and tuning in, we thank you so much for being a part of today's memorial service. Thank you.